Okay, this is just a short video giving you some tips for how to best produce a lab report. So I will say this several times over the course of the semester. Units are important. And I'm sure you've heard this in high school or middle school or whatever. Units, don't forget your units on all your math word problems. But there's some important reasons why. The overriding reason is something that I think is really important with this course is you're trying to come to where you can internalize in your understanding and crystallize in your understanding what you're looking at and what you're reporting on. And so it's easy to get your head really too deep in the weeds with the data and the signal and how the signal looks and forget like what it's even measuring. So when you force yourself to put a unit on it, you quickly can conceptualize what you're measuring, especially when we get into the electrocardiography unit, or section, I should say. We'll be looking at beats per minute. We'll be looking at millivolts in terms of the raw electrical signal coming from the heart. And it's important to recognize what you're measuring so you can conceptualize it. Beats per minute, for example, is something we kind of have a sense for. The heart beats around 60, 80 beats per minute. And so 60 or 80 is a number, but you want to see what the unit is that goes with it so we have a good idea of what we're measuring. And then the other part of your lab report, the first half is going to be reporting on numbers. You're just going to report the raw numbers and you're going to need to remember the units. Then each lab report asks you some conceptual questions. And this gives you a chance, again, to try to internalize in your mind what you're doing in this lab report. So I've taken an example from 2 different lab reports I got in previous semesters, and I'm going to use them to make a point here. So in your first EMG lab report, it's going to say, explain the source of the signals detected by the EMG electrodes. And I got, one of my answers was the following. The EMG signal is the recorded consequence of 1, the propagation of motor nerve impulses in their transmission at the neuromuscular junctions of a motor unit, and 2, the propagation of muscle impulses by the sacrolemma in the T-tubular systems, resulting in excitation-contraction coupling. If I lectured that way, you would hate me. Technically, this is exactly correct because technically it came verbatim, word for word from the lab manual, kind of the introductory section of the lab manual. However, I question whether the person that wrote this internalized a single word of what they wrote. I think they put it in quotes, I hope they did, but whether they kind of got a general gist of what's going on is questionable. Another student answered the same question by simply saying, the muscles exert electrical signals from nerve impulses. Technically, this is actually probably not 100% complete versus the previous answer, but I like this one better because the student made an effort to kind of internalize everything that the lab manual had told them and kind of coalesce that into an answer that was in their own words and that made some sense to them. And that's better because they're starting to make sense of what we're doing in this lab. So when you're doing your lab report, be sure to put units in there, and also don't plagiarize. You've certainly learned that plagiarism is bad from a moral, ethical standpoint, and you would get in trouble with honor code, etc. That's all true, but it also degrades your opportunity to maximize what you've learned in this class. Plagiarizing just shuts off your brain, finds some information, and just writes it down without somehow allowing some information to flow through your own mind and to be absorbed. So if you are really feeling lazy and you do just want to just copy whatever the lab manual says, at a minimum put direct quotes around everything that you've copied directly. That's super important. So that takes away the fact that you've actually just fully plagiarized. But it's better to try to put it into your own words, because in the process of reading all that stuff in the lab manual and trying to coalesce it in your brain, learning happens. That's when the learning is happening. And so be sure as much as you can to put the answers to these questions into your own words. The effort you put into putting it into your own words is going to be a process of learning what the material is about and kind of having an important idea in your mind of what the data is and the information is that you're trying to convey.